From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. We're privileged to have as our guest for this program Chuck Cunningham, Vice President for Federal Affairs at the National Rifle Association. Well, Chuck, you've done a pretty good job so far because Congress hasn't really intruded on the rights of Second Amendment supporters in America.
Well, the 111th Congress has only been in session for 2 weeks. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah. And one of the bad signs was the confirmation, with very little opposition, as the votes are counted, of Eric Holder, the new Attorney General, who did some despicable things on the Second Amendment issue in various capacities, including his time with Janet Reno, including his time as U.S. Attorney. Why don't you go over some of the concerns that you and your colleagues had in the NRA about Holder?
Well, he was an activist supporter of gun control as Deputy Attorney General under Janet Reno and supported the Clinton administration's view, which was there weren't enough gun laws, even though they refused to enforce the existing gun laws. What I think is inexcusable, though, is when he didn't work for them a little over a year ago, he signed an amicus brief, friend of the court brief, in the Heller case. And at that point, he didn't have an employer insisting they do that.
Basically, what he was saying in his amicus brief is that there is not an individual right to keep and bear arms.
That's right, that the Second Amendment is more or less meaningless and that it shouldn't be an individual right, would be dangerous for it to be an individual right. He was questioned on that in the Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearings.
My understanding is that in the course of recruiting people to serve in the executive branch of his administration, prompted in part by Holder, the Obama people asked some fairly intrusive and challenging questions about the attitude of prospective appointees to gun ownership.
They did. They had a gun ownership question in their personnel form asking about gun ownership and if your guns were registered. Obviously, the person who wrote the question doesn't realize that in most states registration is not required, and so most guns are not going to be registered. But that obviously was an important enough issue for them to ask in the personnel form.
And did he not also support the idea of being able to purchase only one gun a month?
That, as well as other restrictive forms of gun control, yes.
And he favors things that the Brady organization favors, such as closing what is called the gun show loophole.
The so-called loophole and banning pseudo-assault weapons and all kinds of things. Virtually any gun control du jour he has been supportive of during his career.
One would think the Democrats have learned their lesson that opposition to the Second Amendment and gun ownership is not a way to win votes and influence people. But they don't seem to have learned that. Well,
it seems to be a short-term memory sometimes. It was learned within the 94 elections, and then it wasn't long, 5 years later, where they were on beating the drums for gun control again in the juvenile justice bill in the wake of Columbine. And Dick Gephardt thought that was a ticket back to the majority, and obviously he was proven wrong on that. Then there was the 2000 election and other successful elections, and they seemed to back off. And the next thing you know, John Kerry's in a goose blind, and others are portraying themselves as friend of the Second Amendment or being a hunter or gun owner, and it's in most cases a disguise for their real views on the issue.
Well, the Republicans missed an opportunity to show their support for the Second Amendment when they rallied to confirm the appointment of Eric Holder to be Attorney General of the United States.
Many of them did indeed. For whatever reason, many of them chose to vote for his confirmation, and there were many issues for which a lot of Americans are opposed to his confirmation other than Second Amendment issues, but those certainly should be of grave concern.
And, of course, one of the things that concerned me about Holder was the role that he played deploying stormtrooper tactics to kidnap Elian Gonzalez, who had been rescued by his mother from Castro's tyranny, and who, thanks to Eric Holder and other Clinton associates, was kidnapped and returned to Castro's control.
He was involved in that and associated with the Ruby Ridge and Waco incidents, and there's a whole string of incidents, and that excludes the pardons and other issues that were brought up at the hearings.
I mean, he's really a despicable character, in my view, on the issues. And I can't understand how any member of the Senate who professes to be in support of the Second Amendment can wind up voting to put Eric Holder in office as the #1 legal officer of the United States of America. You know, politicians have a reputation for flexibility. The governor of New York, Patterson, who came to office when client number 8, his predecessor, Elian Spitzer, had to surrender his position. And mirabile dictu, Patterson did not name Carolyn Kennedy to Hillary Clinton's seat in the Senate, nor did he name Andrew Cuomo, who now could very well wind up as the principal primary challenger to Governor Patterson in 2010. Instead, he named a two-term member of Congress from upstate New York, Mrs. Gillibrand, first name Kathleen, I believe.
Kirsten.
Kirsten Gillibrand, who had a pretty good record in the Congress. She voted against the bailout. She was a strong supporter on Second Amendment issues. She was good on immigration issues. She supported a border fence. Believe it or not, she was one of the few Democrats who co-sponsored House Concurrent Resolution 40, introduced by Virgil Goode, to oppose the North American Union, the Security and Prosperity Partnership, and the NAFTA superhighway. This is extraordinary. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that after her appointment, she said, well, don't worry about that. Where you stand depends on where you sit. Now I'm a senator. And as a member of the Senate, I have to reflect the concerns and views of all the people of New York. And I'm from a hunting family, and that's one of the reasons I got a perfect score from the NRA. But now I'm representing urban people, and I know their concerns are different. Do you have any predictions?
No predictions, just time will tell. If she stays consistent with her House record, she'll be good. But she does have a different constituency now, and we'll have to see how she votes. But she did co-sponsor some good bills and voted for those that she had an opportunity to do so.
Well, a better choice than I would have dared to expect from the Empire State of New York.
Very surprising.
She was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton, and Hillary and Bill both came into her district to campaign for her re-election, and she's got a reputation as being a tremendous fundraiser. She raised $4.5 million in her re-election campaign. She's representing a fairly Republican district. She defeated a popular incumbent, Congressman Sweeney, who ran into some personal difficulties shortly before the election. She had been 19 points down in polls, and she won by 6% by the time the election was over.
Closed the gap very quickly in the last 3 weeks. And before John Sweeney, Jerry Solomon, a strong Second Amendment Republican, represented that district.
Jerry was a great man and a very dear friend of mine and of yours. Well, what are the primary concerns of the National Rifle Association as we move into the opening months of the Obama presidency and of the Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid Congress?
Well, I think what you'll see, just like many of the appointments seem to come from the Clinton era, well, some of the gun policies that the Obama campaign, the National Democratic Party, and the Obama White House have at least posted as their priorities on urban policies, going back to banning pseudo-assault weapons, which we had that ban in effect for 10 years, from 1994 to 2004. It expired. The issue you brought up earlier is closing the so-called gun show loophole, for which there isn't a loophole, but they want to regulate all private transfers of firearms between individuals, including family and friends. And they're also going after what's referred to as the T-Hart Amendment, but it's a firearms trace data disclosure protection provision.
That's T-Hart of Kansas.
That's right, Congressman T-Hart. And his provision prevented sensitive trace data from being disclosed publicly, not because law enforcement doesn't have access to it for bona fide criminal investigations, but you have anti-gun politicians like New York City Mayor Bloomberg who are engaged in fishing expeditions looking to circumvent federal law to be able to sue gun manufacturers and gun dealers.
We have to take a break. Chuck Cunningham, Director of Federal Affairs for the NRA. When we come back, I'd like to get your candid comments about the Scalia opinion in the Heller case regarding D.C. gun laws. And I also want your comments on what the D.C. Council is doing to circumvent the Supreme Court's ruling and violate certainly the spirit of that ruling. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Chuck Cunningham, Director of Federal Affairs for the National Rifle Association. Please stay with us.
Hi, I'm Congressman Tom Tancredo. You know, I just returned from a hearing on the southern border in a place called Brownsville, Texas. One of the participants in the hearing told us that for them, a border really doesn't exist between the United States and Mexico. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people have that attitude, that there are no such things as borders, that they really don't matter, that they're just lines on a map and nobody should pay attention to them, and that we're all just residents of the North American continent. Well, you know what? That's baloney. It's baloney, but only if you will do something about it to prove to the people of this country, and especially to your elected officials, that you know borders matter, that you know the sovereignty of this country is at risk, and that you will take action to make sure that they understand it. That action is best taken by calling your local talk radio stations, writing letters to the editor, and of course, letting members of Congress know that you know. That's the best thing. They're hoping, as a matter of fact, that no one really picks up on this issue of a North American trade association that essentially eliminates borders. But the fact is it's happening. You can see parts of it all of the time. So it's something that we need to stop. America, and I mean the United States of America, not the continent, but the United States of America is at stake. Do your part.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus, sponsor of Conservative Roundtable. Our guest is Director of Federal Affairs for the National Rifle Association, Chuck Cunningham. Chuck, frankly, I was not thrilled with the opinion that Scalia issued on the Heller case. I'm glad that he did reaffirm support of the individual right to keep and bear arms, but he left some real openings for exceptions to that right in the way in which it was worded. Maybe he had to do that in order to get 5 votes. That's
what I think the point was. I think he had to hold Kennedy and probably conceded issues that if he were king for a day would have been different. And he didn't want a majority opinion with a concurring opinion. He wanted 5 votes, and I think that's, I don't know that for sure. I'm not a lawyer myself, but I suspect that's the case.
Good guess. Now, the flagrant disregard of the spirit, if not the letter, of the Heller decision by the Supreme Court on the part of the D.C. City Council is outrageous. And if there were a Republican majority in the House, one would hope that they would slap down the D.C. Council. What's happening? Why don't you review what's been happening in D.C.?
Well, in D.C., they've more or less banned self-defense with firearms for years, that you could have a rifle or shotgun if it was registered, but it couldn't be functional or loaded, and you couldn't have a handgun unless you had it before 1976 when they passed their gun control law. The only reason they've made changes in the last 8 months is because of the Heller case and because of congressional pressure. We ran out of time in getting a bill actually passed all the way through Congress in the 110th Congress, but the House overwhelmingly passed a legislation that would accomplish some important things and would guarantee the Second Amendment rights of D.C. residents. One of the things that the federal government has to do that the D.C. Council can't do is allow residents of D.C. to be able to buy handguns in other states. Federal law since 1968, the Gun Control Act of 68, prohibits interstate sale of handguns, and so they can't legally buy a handgun in any state other than their state of residence, that is D.C., thankfully not a state. That does need to be changed at some point so that people who already live there have legal access to be able to acquire them, because obviously the criminals have instant access to guns.
Well, now you've got members of the D.C. Council passing district legislation, making it more arduous for D.C. residents to own guns.
Well, in some cases they've made things more restrictive. In a lot of cases they've loosened it, but what they've done is these emergency ordinances that only last for 90 days, so they keep moving the goalpost. And in fact, they were supposed to take some action, I believe, today because something was supposed to expire, and we're trying to draft the legislation for the 111th Congress, and we're trying to wait for the merry-go-round to stop so we can see where we need to be.
Now, you and I both live in Virginia, and recently one of the committees in the Virginia legislature passed legislation that I believe dealt with the so-called gun show loophole.
That's correct. The Senate Courts of Justice Committee reported it, and the Senate's going to vote on it tomorrow, actually.
What do you think will happen?
I wouldn't be surprised, given the changes in votes in the committee, that the Senate passes it, but it shouldn't pass the House of Delegates, and so it shouldn't get to the anti-gun governor's desk for him to sign it into law.
Now, it's amazing that Kane and the Democrats have been so successful in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Interestingly, Kane is married to the daughter of Linwood Holton, the most left-wing Republican ever to occupy high office in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Technically the first Republican governor in the Commonwealth. Technically.
Whose children, at least one of them, went down to Nicaragua to work for Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas back in the 1970s, and who reportedly is under consideration for a U.S. attorney position here in Virginia, which would be utterly disgraceful. But looking at the opportunities, you've got Terry McCauliffe, who was a huge fundraiser for the Democrats nationally, coming into Virginia. He says he's lived here for 20 years, so he's not a carpetbagger, but I don't think people have noticed his presence to any degree. And he's making a race for the Democratic nomination in opposition to two established Virginia Democrats, Brian Moran, a member of the legislature, and Craig Deeds, who ran a close race for Attorney General before. Will Terry McCauliffe, and by the way, McCauliffe has already begun spending some of his money. He started with a $30,000 buy in Hampton, which is your hometown originally. Yes. Do you think that in Virginia, even though there are a lot of foreigners who now live in Virginia, I mean people from the north and from more liberal parts of the Union, but there is still an historic pride in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I don't think people are going to be comfortable with having someone who is obviously an outsider in terms of a lack of participation in and familiarity with Virginia politics becoming governor. What do you think? Well,
money can change a lot of minds, and it has in politics over the years. $850 million had a big impact on our presidential race, and not many, if you went back 4 years ago, would have thought that a Democrat, particularly a very liberal Democrat, would win the Commonwealth in the presidential race. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility. Brian Moran resigned from the House of Delegates to run full-time, and his seat was almost taken by a Republican. And then Craig Deeds is still in the Senate, and he actually voted for that bill you referred to in committee.
The audience for this program is all over America, and they may not be aware of the fact that Virginia has the most liberal, in the good sense, campaign finance laws in the country. You can receive contributions in any amount. If someone wanted to give $1 billion to a candidate, it's perfectly legal in Virginia. If someone wanted to spend $1 billion, it's perfectly legal. And that may have been one of the lures to Terry McCauliffe.
It could have been, because there is no limit on contributions, nor are they restricted to individual contributions. Corporate donations are allowed as well.
Now, Virginia's congressional delegation is moving more and more in a leftward direction. Now, we used to have some very conservative Democratic congressmen in the Virginia delegation. Some of them were good friends of mine and of yours, but the new Democrats are not of that persuasion, and the Republicans aren't doing that well. One of the things that amazed me is that Frank Wolf did extraordinarily well in his re-election bid. And in
a rematch.
Yeah, he seems to be able to hang in there as long as he wants.
Well, I think he knew what he had ahead of him this time and prepared for it better and started early.
Yeah. And Tom Davis, probably the most liberal Republican congressman in Virginia, and perhaps even in the whole country, has gone on to the world of big bucks, although he still tries to have an impact. Now, if you were to tell our audience the main goals of the National Rifle Association during the Obama presidency, what would they be?
Well, it's to protect the Second Amendment from all attacks, and that Congress is going to consider. We don't know what those are. We don't know when they're coming, but we expect a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with over the last decade or more to come back. You've mentioned gun shows and pseudo-assault weapons. T-Hart Amendment is relatively new in the last 5 years, but those are going to be the main issues that we should be dealing with. And the strength of our organization, quite frankly, is our membership and even beyond our membership, carry permit holders, licensed hunters, the whole pro-gun constituency. And that's what needs to get engaged like never before. It worked for the 94 elections, it worked for the 2000 elections, and we have to make it happen again.
And the NRA is getting stronger all the time, isn't it?
We are. Since early October, membership and contributions have increased dramatically, as well as gun sales.
If it's not a secret, how many members are there?
I think now we're at 3.8 million.
That's wonderful.
Our record high was 4.3 million Election Day 2000.
Really? Is there any organization on the left of comparable strength? An anti-gun organization?
No, definitely not. There's the Brady Bunch, the Brady Center, Brady Campaign, but they have very small membership. Their PAC is very small. Where they have support is in the media and a lot of others with the establishment.
When we come back after a brief break, I'm going to ask Chuck Cunningham to explain the whole concept of concealed carry laws. Please stay with us.
Hi, I'm United States Representative Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th Congressional District. As we enter a new millennium of hope and peril, with so many problems besetting our country and yet so many opportunities before us, it is oftentimes tempting to think that your voice doesn't matter. What can one person do to make a difference in the life of their community and their country? Well, the first thing you can do is to contact your legislator. You are one of the sovereign citizens of the United States. You elect your servants to work for you in Congress. Let them know what you think. Send them a letter, send them an email, call them on the phone. Your voice matters, because if you don't raise your voice in the interest of our free republic, who will?
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. If you're interested in the types of issues we discuss, please check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org. If you would like to receive more information, no cost or obligation, fax us your contact information. Our fax number is 703-281-4108. And, of course, on the screen is information about how you can get in touch with Chuck Cunningham and the National Rifle Association and support the great work which they do. I'm proud to be a member of the NRA, and I appreciate all the work they do. One of the issues that confuses people is concealed carry, Chuck, and why you need to have permission to conceal a weapon on your person. Why don't you explain the concealed carry laws and how they variously apply around the country?
Well, there are 48 states that allow some form of concealed carrying. Most of them are more permissive than others. Illinois and Wisconsin, you cannot carry concealed at all. There is no permit or application process. But a century ago or so, a lot of people carried openly, but not many people carried concealed. It's a relatively new phenomenon for carry permits and the ability of law-abiding citizens to carry concealed. And it's one of the best issues to argue in the sense that criminals don't apply for carry permits and the people who go through the cost and hassle of getting a permit don't commit crimes.
I remember Ollie North had a hard time getting a permit because there was a left-wing jurist who didn't like Ollie and did his best to block his...
That's right. That circuit court judge that didn't renew his permits, no longer a judge.
Yeah, that's good. Well, listen, Chuck, it's always a pleasure to be with you. I congratulate you on the work you do and your wonderful family, your wife and 10 children. And I pray that the NRA will continue to so ably defend our Second Amendment rights.
Thank you very much.
God bless you all. Thank you, Chuck. Yep. And thanks for joining us on Conservative Roundtable.